And this week, as well, the Hachaim has some incredible insights all on the first word. So you talk about how the different layers of the Torah, and here we can delve into the first word of the Parsha and see how the Hachaim, how he interprets this first word of the Torah. So the verse that we're dealing with, the first verse of this week's Torah portion, is Eila Pikudey HaMishkan. These are the accountings of the Mishkan, calculations of the Mishkan. The Mishkan Ha'edos, the Mishkan of testimony, Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe, which was counted through the word of Moshe. The labor of the Leviim, Avedos HaLeviim, Biyadi Samar ben Aaron HaKohen, in the hands of Isamar, the son of Aaron the Kohen. So it basically is telling us that we're going to be talking about the accounting of all the details, the donations of the Mishkan. That's the simple meaning of the pasuk. The Hachaim is bothered with why does it use the word these are the these is the counting. Eila Pikudei HaMishkan, these. And it wants to know, I guess it could have used the word Zois or some other words. He doesn't explain what it should have, what word would have been better. But when it says these, it's generally excluding something else. Like these are the countings of the Mishkan. So the Hachaim starts off by saying the reason why it says these is to say that these are the calculations. Nothing else in the world is really worth calculating. All other numbers are insignificant. They're meaningless. But here, this is something valuable. This is something important. Everything else that a person that has and owns and that he counts, they're from what the Hachaim calls kinyanim hamadumin. They are imaginary purchases. They're from purchases that are property of kinyanim hamadumin, imagined property, and that is not called accounting. Basically, a person's wealth is temporary, and you can't call that an accounting. But when it comes to the tabernacle, that is what's called counting. And the Hachaim adds an interesting point. He says, what is the word for money in Hebrew? It's mamoin. Mamoin, or in Aramaic or Hebrew. I guess in Hebrew it's probably called kesef. But the word mamoin is commonly used. And the Hachaim wants to say that mamoin comes from three words. Ma ata moina. What are you counting? In other words, what value is money? That's what mamoin stands for. This all has minimal value in the which basically means in the big picture, materialism is not what's really valuable. And this is what the Parsha, this is what the first word is teaching us, that these are important to count. Mishkan, this is where counting comes, is important, is value, there's value. This is a real counting. Everything else in the world is not called counting. And the reason is because the Mishkan is mufla, it's wondrous, and you have the Hashem's Shechina there. And so this is what's considered valuable. By the way, I did want to mention last week, we were talking about the laws of Shabbos. And I did want to make a correction because it was brought up in the discussion that If a person's oven goes off, or if a person's crock pot goes off, would you be allowed to ask a guy? Because we spoke about speaking to a guy last week. If you can ask a guy to do work for you, and generally not, but there are certain exceptions where it's permissible. Generally, you can't ask a guy to do things for you, but there are scenarios where it is permissible. So the question was, if like your crock pot, the cord fell out, would you be allowed to ask a guy to put the cord back in? So it turns out that putting the cord back into a crock pot, to the outlet, putting the cord back in would be considered a biblical prohibition of igniting fire, even if the cholent is cooked already, which means you don't have a problem of cooking, you don't have a problem of a non-Jew cooking your food, but you would have a problem, it's cooked already, you would have a problem of making a fire, and that would be biblical. And for a biblical law, you cannot, there isn't a leniency, at least unless this was a matter of life and death, but there is not a leniency to ask a guy. The situations where you would be allowed to ask a guy are on rabbinic prohibitions, not on biblical prohibitions. And even then, there needs to be a good reason, like tzorech mitzvah, has to be a real mitzvah, and a hefsid meruba, big loss, or tsar gadol, a huge pain, a huge. So there would have to be an excuse why you would ask a guy to do a rabbinic prohibition, but a biblical prohibition. It turns out that if a person's the cord came out from their cholent, you would not be allowed to ask a guy to put it back in. So just to clarify that, because it was we were discussing it last week. Someone had a question.
It was my situation.
Whatever it was,
but it wasn't what the situation was. My wife forgot to turn it on. It was plugged in. She forgot to turn the switch. Did the on. So I when I ask, I don't ask. I always say, we're having a problem. My wife forgot to turn the switch on, and then the person puts two and two together and says, "Oh, I'll turn it on for you." But we don't ask.
Right. But so it doesn't matter. Allowed? It still wouldn't be allowed, and that would actually be a very complicated scenario because it sounds like the cholent wasn't cooked then.
Right.
If it was never turned on, that would be a problem of bishul akum as well, and which is a small issue, except that it could create a problem of that the utensil, the crock pot might need to be kosher, because that could be a bishul akum problem. And then of course, you have a problem of a biblical prohibition of cooking, which is a bigger problem, and the biblical prohibition of making a fire. So in other words, you're asking, you didn't ask the guy, but still you're benefiting from the guy's work, and even hinting would not be allowed in that scenario. So it definitely would have been a problem. Now,
so just to clarify, you're saying it would have been like making a fire. So how come
not only making a fire, but it's also cooking on Shabbos.
So how come we were told that turning on the light on Shabbos we thought it was you're not allowed to because it's like making a fire, and I think Rabbi Wernick said it's not because of that. It's for something. It's really maybe making a completing the circuit or something.
So that's a good question about turning a light on or off from a guy, but
no, not from a guy, from us. If we accidentally turn the light on, I thought the problem was making a fire, and I think he said that the problem is completing the circuit, making a completion or something like this, or building. I forget which one it was, but it wasn't making a fire.
Well, it could have to do with the fact that a bulb, there are different types of bulbs, and it could be that not necessarily is a bulb an actual fire, especially like an LED or a fluorescent, or I don't know. So it could be it has something to do with that, but maybe we'll talk about it after. Anyway, I don't want to. Yeah, I'm
It
not
wasn't
sure.
the
I'm not
bulb,
100% sure,
was
but
completing the circuit.
uh-huh. So
Anyway,
it's a
well,
regular
that's,
incandescent bulb
yeah, he said, yeah, he didn't mention it's different from bulb to bulb. He just said it completing
uh-huh,
the circuit. I think is what he said.
uh-huh. And that he allowed it, that there was a permit to ask
No,
the guy. Oh,
no,
he didn't.
he just clarified which malacha it was.
Uh-huh. So which malacha was it?
I think he said it was completing the circuit. It was like it was either building or was making a completion of
Um,
something.
Makav Patish. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that could be in addition to, he said, so there's no making a fire from with the light bulb. That's what you're bringing out, that it's not an issue of making a fire with the light bulb.
If I'm not
Uh,
mistaken, yeah.
right. Okay. So I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to look into it. But when it comes to turning a crock pot on, the fire, there is a fire element there. And in addition to that, there is also cooking. So you have two problems: making a fire and cooking food, which is raw. So you'd have two major issues. Anyway, so it definitely would be problematic. I don't know if you'd have to kosher the crock. I think you would have to kosher the crock pot out because it's bishul akum. But anyway, maybe we'll talk about it after, or we'll get back to each other on it. Anna, did you want to ask something, or no? Okay. Did anyone want to say something? Okay. Guess not. Okay. So anyway, going back to what we were talking about. So we have this um, first word of the Torah portion, Elah, which we now translated to mean that it's nothing else is really considered accounting except counting for the Mishkan, because the Mishkan has Hashem's Shachan Sham Elokei Olam Hashem. Hashem is dwelling there and resting there, and it's the Mishkan. He calls it the Mishkan Hamufla, the wondrous Mishkan. And this is something, it's going to last. In fact, it says the Mishkan lasts forever. Well, so it's hidden, but it's still in existence. So that's what's real. That's called accounting. And you're counting something real. Everything else comes and goes. Then he says that there is a statement in the Talmud that says blessing does not exist on anything that's counted. And so here it uses the word these are the counting to say that here the accounting is not going to cause any negative elements, even though normally once you count something, you can't have Hashem's blessing on it because it limits the ability to have an extra blessing because you counted it. So you can't have, like, it can't expand because that would be too big of a miracle. So, for example, the Talmud talks about if a person is counting their grain. So if you want to ask God for a blessing in your grain, ask it from him before you count it, because then God could expand your grain and it won't be like an outright miracle. But if you already counted your grain and you see that there's exactly 100 bushels of grain, and then you ask God, please make a miracle in my grain. And so now you're expecting there to be 101 bushels or 110 bushels. That would be an outright miracle because now you've counted your grain already, and you're asking God for like a crazy miracle to happen. But if you didn't count it yet, then for Hashem to make it like it's to have a little an extra blessing in something that wasn't counted yet, it's not like an outright miracle. And there you could ask God for a blessing in your grain because it wouldn't be like an outright miracle. But here, so basically what comes out from that is that once you count something, it sort of limits it from the blessing. And so the reason why it says over here the word Elah, these are the countings of the Mishkan, emphasizing, according to this second interpretation, that these you can count and it won't limit the blessing, even though normally we say something that's counted, God's blessing can't now really rest upon it. anything that's already counted or specified. But here, this isn't a problem. Eila Pikudey Mishkan, these are the countings of the Mishkan, and you can count it, and it's not a problem. There's no concern because this counting will bring blessing, and it will add merit, and it'll also bring blessing upon the contributor. And the reason is because this is the Mishkan, which is the source of holiness and blessing in the world. And so any of the donors, even after it's counted, the blessing it'll actually bring more blessings. So in other words, there's no problem with being counted. That would be the second interpretation. Then he comes up with a third interpretation, and that is that when it says these, what it's hinting to is that normally, if you have a bunch of sins that you've done, if a person did many sins, he's using the term a bundle of sins. So you need to perform a bundle of mitzvahs to negate or to balance out all those sins, to atone for those sins, to rectify those sins. And the Jewish people, what did they do in the two parshas, the second parsha 2 weeks ago, the parsha of Kisisa? The Jewish people made the golden calf. So what was the word that they used when they made the golden calf? Eila Elokecha Yisrael. These are your gods, Israel. So the golden calf, what was the word that they started with when they claimed this is this is our new God? They said Eila. These are your gods, Israel. And the same word Eila is used here. So in the Hachaim's brilliance of connecting these two stories and connecting these two words, that it uses the same word, it's basically saying that this word Eila, the counting of the Mishkan, is a way of rectifying the sin of the golden calf. Because that sin was the word Eila, and here is the sin, here is the mitzvah with the word Eila. And the Jewish people sinned with the Eila of the golden calf, and therefore it says that this would be a atonement, and it comes out that this is the meaning that it says Eidos. This is a Mishkan HaEidos. It's the tabernacle of testimony. What does that mean? That it's a testimony that Hashem atoned and forgave the sin of the golden calf. And if you calculate, you will find that every detail of the golden calf was counteracted by a mitzvah in the Mishkan. And and he goes into the details, and he continues and says that they had a desire for a God that should go before them. And we see here that they are preparing a place for Hashem to be before them. They built an altar and brought upon it burnt offerings. They're building an altar in the tabernacle, and they're bringing upon it burnt offerings and peace offerings. They gave their gold to the golden calf, and now they're giving their gold and silver and all important, desirable utensils or vessels. They're giving them all to Hashem. They took off their earrings, and they are now bringing, the men with the women, not only earrings, but they're taking off all of their jewelry and giving it donating it. And every precious vessel they're giving to the tabernacle. So you see how each of the things that they did wrong, they're rectifying now by doing right. And that's the first word of the Torah portion, Elah, that it's showing that this Elah is rectifying the other Elah, these two words that one was the sin and one is the mitzvah. Yes, David.
What about Elah Toldos? Parshas Toldos.
So we would have to look back in the Hachaim HaKadosh insight. Why does it say Elah over there? And the only thing is I don't have his book in front of me, although I probably could pull it up here. 1 second, maybe I could pull it up in Safari. I'm not going to look into it.
The point of the Mishkan was built specifically to rectify the sin of the golden calf. So it makes sense to connect the Ele of the Mishkan to the Ele of Elohecha Yisrael. So I can understand. You can have a million Ele in different places, but we're talking
I'm just
about
wondering
what connects.
I'm just wondering if I hear your point, Ezra, but I'm just wondering if the Hachaim discusses it. In other words, we don't have to go into it and say it that not necessarily is it connected to this Elah, but I'm just wondering if he discusses it as being that he considers it a question over here. It's surprising why he uses the word Elah, so it would be interesting to see if he discusses it. And my phone is not cooperating, so I can't look it up now, but maybe to be looked into after.
Rabbi?
Yes.
One question. What happened to the golden calf?
What happened to it? Moshe Rabbeinu ground it up, and he gave it to them as some type of a potent mixture with water and a drink that they would drink, and it would show if they actually sinned or didn't sin. So the Jewish people drank this mixed, this ground up gold. And whatever was left was used for this. There's a mashke called Goldschlager, and I think that's where the leftovers went to. No, I'm just joking. But they drank it. They drank the gold, a mixture of gold. That's why we all became so rich. We have gold inside of us.
That's right. There's Goldstein, Goldberg.
And that's where we got the names from, right?
Mordechai has a comment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, Parshas Maaseh also starts Elah.
Elah, that's true. Right. I should just mention also that the Goldschlager is, I don't think, kosher, so don't drink it, even though I mentioned it. Okay, so anyway, the Or HaChaim continues, and he mentions that as this Elah is a atonement for the golden calf, then he says that now there's another point with the word Elah, and that is that he says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who counted everything. All the donations that came in, he was the one who counted. And so the Torah is coming to testify and verify that Moshe Rabbeinu's counting, that he didn't pocket anything, and he was trustworthy, and it says Elah Pikudey, these are the counts of the Mishkan, and it says, what is this count that Hashem is verifying? It's Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe, that what was counted through the word of Moshe, and it specifically says through the word of Moshe, and not that Moshe counted. And the reason is that there's no one else to verify this count. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who we relied on, and it says they took from Moshe's presence they took from before Moshe, meaning that everyone had brought it to Moshe first, and he alone received it all, and they took it from him. So what this means is that the Torah is testifying that everything was done properly. And the question is, why wasn't Moshe nervous? Why did Moshe do it this way? So in other words, it's saying these are the calculations of the Mishkan of testimony that was done through the word of Moshe, and meaning that we can rely that Hashem is testifying that it was done with honesty and it was he's reliable, it's accurate. And the question is, why did Moshe not maybe bring someone else in? Why wasn't he nervous that maybe people would question him? And the Hachaim says, well, could be because Hashem was speaking to him constantly, and people would not have a question would not think to question such a person. If he ever pocketed some stuff, Hashem would be disgusted with him, and Hashem would know, of course, even though he might have done it secretly. Hashem knows all the secrets, and for sure Hashem would not speak to him anymore. So the fact that Hashem is speaking with him is clear to Moshe. Was clear to Moshe that he shouldn't need to have someone with him to testify. So this is what the Hachaim says. The question is, so then it seems to be a contradiction. Moshe was sure that he doesn't need to prove himself. So why is the Torah proving? Why would the Torah then say that it's testifying that there's no problems? Sounds like a contradiction from the Hachaim. On the one hand, he says that Hashem testified about him in the Parsha, in the first pasuk. This is like a Hashem's testimony that he was accurate and did everything correctly. But then he says that Moshe didn't think he needed anyone to be with him, and so he did not have anyone go along with him. Why wasn't he safeguarding himself from potential issues? So the answer to this question seems to be that if you look in the Medrash does say, again, the Hachaim doesn't mention this question. He says both insights, but to me it seems like a contradiction. But I think the answer is based on a Medrash. The Medrash does say that the Jewish people did suspect Moshe. So, and they thought that they did murmur about him and said, maybe where do you think he got so rich? Where did Moshe get so rich? The typical question, about a fundraiser. All of a sudden he comes home with he's driving a new car and he's got a new suit on. It's like, where did he get so rich from? But the thing is, people started talking about Moshe was very wealthy. Now we know he got wealthy from Hashem gave him the extras from the sapphire of the second set of tablets. So that's what he got wealthy from. But anyway, the people were, when you can, come up with a good line, a good lashon hara, good gossip. So they were talking about, where do you think he got so wealthy? Well, everyone's bringing him all these donations. So the people did question him. So Moshe didn't suspect them that they were going to question him, but they did. And because they did, that's why Hashem testified in the parsha that there was no sin involved, and even though Moshe was pretty convinced that how could they even question, why would they question me if Hashem is speaking to me? But nevertheless, they did question him, and Hashem gave testimony, so to speak, in this pasuk. Now, the Hachaim does give an alternative answer to why Moshe did not protect himself. And he says maybe because Hashem commanded him specifically to collect all the funds, and that's what Hashem wanted. So Hashem wanted him to collect all the funds. He wasn't taking anyone with him because that was basically a command. And he learns it very interestingly. He has a translation of an earlier verse, which is the beginning of the portion called Truma, and he has a way of interpreting it there that Hashem told him, if you take it yourself. If any other people take it, they should be with a group of 3. And that's how he translates the pasuk, Daber el Bnei Yisrael. You should be a dabar, which he translates not to mean a speech, but it means authority. You could be authority to the Bnei Yisrael to take their donations. The yikhu li truma, regarding if they're going to collect it, make sure that they have 3 people so that it's done properly. But for you, you do it. You could do it yourself, and you're called a yachid mumcha. Like when it comes to annulling vows, there's a concept of a yachid mumcha. One individual who's an expert, he can annul vows. So here also uses that term that it's like you can collect the donations alone. Anyone else, they should have I think he says over there 3 people. But anyway, that's his interpretation there in Parshas Truma. And let me just pull it up actually, because that I do have here, and it's he brings it on that first pasuk over there, and he says that it's he says over there that you alone should be the administrator of this thing, meaning collecting the donations, because you are a yachid mumcha, you are this expert individual. You can serve in place of 3, taspik b'makam shleisha, and for sure in place of 2 with regard to authority, or 3 people for assessing. So that's the thing. There was 2 points that were needed to be done. Number 1 was they assessed people how much if they were capable of giving, and regarding extracting and collecting it from the people, that you need to have 2 people. So basically, if there's anyone else who's going to do it, the yikhu, they should have the plural, meaning they need to have their regular number, and that had to do with his interpretation that you need to have 3 people or 2 people. He says assessing an amount an individual is to contribute needs 3 people, but using authority to collect it, you need 2 people. So anyway, but Moshe Rabbeinu could do everything as one. He's a yachid mumcha. He can do everything just an individual, and that's based on that verse. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu did not choose anyone else to go along with him when he got the donations, because that was Hashem's command. Then it says that another explanation of how Moshe Rabbeinu was trustworthy, because it says that these are the counts of the Mishkan, and it says the Mishkan of testimony. And how is the Mishkan testifying about Moshe not stealing it? So he says that it has to do with the fact that no one else was able to put up the tabernacle. The tabernacle had it was a big problem. If you think about the beams, I don't know if any of you have tried carrying 2x4s. Try carrying a 16-foot 2x4. It's quite, or 2x6 or 2x8. They're quite heavy. This was not a 16-foot 2x6 or 2x8. This was 3 feet by 2 feet wide in depth, 20 feet long. So this was a 20-footer, 2 feet by 3 feet, well, approximately. I guess, yeah. There are different opinions as to the exact measurement in feet, but it's quite a nice heavy beam. And the Jewish people had a big problem putting it up, setting it up. And it just wouldn't go. It was very heavy. And even though they had, multiple people helping, but it was somehow there was a big problem putting it up. And only Moshe Rabbeinu was able to put it up. So the Hachaim says that you can tell from here that if Hashem made a miracle, that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to put it up, it must be that he didn't sin at all by pocketing anything, because Hashem would not make a miracle of someone who sinned in that specific matter. So if Hashem allowed Moshe to put it up in a miraculous way, and everyone else for some reason weren't able to do it, and Hashem's presence, divine presence, rested on Moshe and was able to do it. So this is testimony that he is what's called a Niki Kapayim. That's the term used. Niki Kapayim means a pure palms. He has clean palms. He hasn't taken anything that's not his, and there's nothing of stolen goods in his possession. Hashem wouldn't make a miracle to anyone that does sin, especially in that specific area that he did a sin. Hashem's not going to make a miracle. So in other words, maybe, someone did a sin of stealing. Maybe Hashem would help that person in some other scenario, but he's not going to help him with the matter that he stole from. So here, if Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who is putting up the tabernacle, and he's the only one who's, for whatever reason, able to, like no one else, somehow Hashem made it that they couldn't get it up, just wouldn't stay. It's not, it was falling down. So therefore, it's testimony from the Mishkan. In other words, that's how he's translating it, that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is a testimony to Moshe's integrity, and that's why Hashem made it, by the fact that Hashem made that is proven by the fact that Hashem made a miracle for Moshe Rabbeinu. Then he continues and he says, maybe it's just that Moshe is stronger than most people. And we do know that Moshe had a incredible amount of might. And there's a Gemara about it. Basically, maybe you could say that that's the cause of Moshe Rabbeinu's ability. And maybe it wasn't. It's not a testimony that Moshe is so honest. He's just stronger. So the Hachaim brings down the end of the verse. It says, this is the avodah of the Levium. This is the labor for the Levium in the hands of Isamar. What does that mean? What it means is that who normally took down the tabernacle and put it up and so on? The Levites. So was it possible to carry? Did they have the ability to carry it and put it up and take it down? They did. For some reason, Hashem made it that the first time around, to get it standing, no one could do it. Afterwards, anyone could do it. It was heavy. It was extremely heavy. But they had numerous people helping. And these were probably strong Levites. And they were able to put it up. So the verse testifies and says that the first time this was able to be done was only able to be done through Moses, Moshe. Afterwards, the Levium, they were able to, the Levium had that job and they did it. And so you see, it's not from strength that he was able to do it, because other people had more strength. They had numerous people, and yet they couldn't do it. And so the fact that it was able to be done in the future with the Levium, and it was in the hands of Isamar, who was in charge of those Levites, he was in charge of the group. So you see that they really had the ability to put it up and take it down. And it wasn't about strength. It was about some spiritual matter that Hashem made a miracle and made Moshe Rabbeinu be able to put it up. And the fact that Hashem made Moshe Rabbeinu have that, made a miracle, and that through Moshe, that is the source that Moshe didn't steal anything. Because Hashem would not make a miracle for someone who stole things. Now, according to this, he says, we now understand, why does it say over here that this was the work of the Levites in the hand of Isamar? Why is it mentioning that? So the Hachaim is explaining the first verse of the parsha, and he's explaining that it's all about a testimony that Moshe didn't steal. And the proof is from the fact that Moshe was the only one who was able to put up the tabernacle. No one else could. And it didn't have to do with Moshe Rabbeinu's strength, because the other people did it after Moshe did it once. They all did it all the time. And now we understand why it ends off the verse with who is in charge. It says, B'yad Isamar ben Aaron HaKohen. It's in the hands of Isamar. Why is it mentioning that? And why doesn't it mention the same thing when it talks about the work that Elazar was in charge of? It doesn't mention Elazar. Only mentions here Isamar. So he said, according to this, we understand, because what it's emphasizing is that this was a assembly was done often, and there were people who were used to doing this, and there was Isamar was in charge of this. In other words, this was a dismantling. It was done often, and it wasn't because of Moshe's strength. So then the Hachaim says, but maybe you're still not going to be satisfied. Maybe you're going to tell me it's because Moshe was so smart. So he knew if you hold it this way, the weight, he knew how to manipulate the weight and somehow hold it up in a way and balance it. Maybe he was smart and he was sharp, and he knew how to put it up. And really, it wasn't an act of a miraculous act. So on this, it says, Betzalel, and that's the next verse. Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur did all of this that Hashem commanded him. That Hashem commanded Moshe. So, and with him was Eliyav, who did all the work and the craftsman work with embroidery and so on, weaving and embroidery, and all these different materials. Now, so why does it mention that afterwards? So he says what it's basically saying is that Betzalel had Hashem's understanding come to him. In other words, he was able to link and channel in to what God wanted. And even things that Moshe didn't tell him to do, he knew what Hashem wanted Moshe to do. He knew what Hashem told Moshe without Moshe telling him. Even he had a special line, direct line to God, so to speak. And he knew what Hashem gave him some type of prophecy that he would know what to do. And Eliyav was with him as well, and nevertheless, they were unable to put up the with all their wisdom and with all their holiness, they were not able. Well, maybe he's only talking about. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to put words into the Hachaim. His emphasis here is even things that Moshe didn't tell him, he understood. And what it seems like it's emphasizing is that it's all about his wisdom. That he had a tremendous amount of wisdom, and Eliyav also had a tremendous amount of wisdom of how to, put together this Mishkan. And he even knew things that Moshe didn't tell him because of his wisdom. So nevertheless, even with all their wisdom, they were not able to do it. And he brings it from the Medrash that even the craftsmen of the artisans was of no use. It didn't help. They were not able to put it up. So he says, you see clearly that it's not an issue of wisdom, but rather it was a miracle, and Hashem would not make a miracle if Moshe had taken anything. Okay, so that's really, and then it says, now we understand why it mentions Betzalel after it mentioned him already many times, that he was involved and he was in charge. It's coming to emphasize this testimony that that this was truly a miracle and it wasn't just great wisdom. And this is the testimony that it says that Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe, that it was counted through the word of Moshe, to say that there was no suspicion. It removed any suspicion when Moshe put up the Mishkan. It removed any suspicion that that anyone could have had about him stealing. Then he comes up with another interpretation. And what is this interpretation? The Mishkan was a atonement for the Egel. Now, I should mention, and I did want to mention this earlier, that there are different interpretations as to when was the tabernacle commanded, when were the Jews commanded to build a tabernacle. The common understanding is what we're learning here, and that is that the tabernacle was commanded after they sinned with the golden calf. Hashem commanded them, build a tabernacle. This will be an atonement. There are other interpretations that really Moshe was commanded to build a tabernacle even before they sinned with the golden calf. And there's even like an intermediate interpretation that, and what I mean by that is that Moshe was commanded to build a tabernacle before they sinned with the golden calf, but after they sinned with the golden calf, Moshe told the Jews about building the tabernacle. Now, both of these ways of learning, there's, in other words, there's three ways of learning this. But two of the ways really show that the tabernacle was not an atonement for the golden calf. But one way of learning it is that, and that's the common way of learning, is that the tabernacle was an atonement for the golden calf. Now, the Hachaim wants to emphasize here that how terrible was the sin of the golden calf? It was called idol worship. Even though initially maybe they had in mind that they're just going to use the golden calf as an intermediary, like Moses, as some type of a not as a god, but then ultimately the golden calf was worshipped, and so it was considered the sin of idol worship. What's the law of the sin of idol worship? The sin of idol worship is considered equal to the entire Torah, and so the verse is basically saying these. Again, we're translating the first word of the verse. Many translations. This translation is that these are the calculations, or the mitzvahs, really. These are the mitzvahs that are dependent on the Mishkan, which is a testimony that Hashem forgave the Jewish people. What does that mean? That all the mitzvahs of the Torah that were commanded to Moshe, they are all included in building the tabernacle. And somehow, the tabernacle and doing the mitzvahs is very connected to doing all the mitzvahs of the Torah. So it comes out that the Mishkan is there's a mechanism here that's atoning for the sin. In other words, the sin included all the laws of the Torah. Sin of idol worship is considered to be like violating the entire Torah. So in order to atone for that, you need to fulfill all the mitzvahs. And building the Mishkan is considered like fulfilling all the mitzvahs, and therefore it's atoned for. And then he says, calculate the words. If those people who like numerical values, Pikudey HaMishkan, the accounting of the Mishkan, if you calculate those letters into numbers, each letter has a certain number. It's called gematria, and the word Pikudey HaMishkan equals 615. Now we know there's 613 mitzvahs, but the Hachaim figures out that you could use this calculation because there's also the two tablets. So the 613 mitzvahs, plus you have the two tablets, and the Jewish people, what did they sin against? They sinned against the 613 mitzvahs because when they worshipped idols, it's like you didn't do the whole Torah. And did they cause something to happen to the tablets? What did they cause to happen to the tablets? They caused Moshe to break the tablets. So they sinned 615 sins. They did the 613 sins plus breaking the tablets. So the Pikudey HaMishkan, he says, look at that calculation. The 615 is the atonement for the sin of the golden calf, which is the 613 mitzvahs. In other words, sinning with idol worship is all the mitzvahs is transgressed, and you sinned against the breaking of the tablets, causing the breaking of the tablets. So this is building the Mishkan is an atonement. He says, as a result, the sin of the golden calf will be forgotten because it was rectified. Okay, then he continues and he says that this is the service of the Leviah. And here he says something interesting. He says, you might think, oh, well, the Jewish people were atoned for the golden calf. What happened when they sinned with the golden calf? What did Hashem do to the service in the temple and tabernacle? Hashem switched from the firstborn to who? To the Levites, right? Now the Levites became in charge. It used to be the firstborn, but now it got switched to the Levites. But now the Jewish people got atoned. So you might say maybe the firstborn should get it back, right? If Hashem atoned for the sin, so maybe you'll say, okay, let's give back the service to the firstborn. That's not a good question. So he says that for this, it says no. Avodas halavim. It adds in this verse, it's an atonement. You've got atoned for, but the service is for the Levium. Avodas halavim. It continues in the verse and says that it's meant for the Levium, and they're the ones who are going to get this service. And he includes in the Levium, it means the Kohanim and the Levium. It's included in both because sometimes we call the Kohanim the Levium. It's the same family basically, and basically the Avodah stayed in hands of the Levium. Now, Ezra, you have a question.
Two questions. The first one is when the
just one second. Let me mute everyone, and then you'll unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
When the Jews went out to ask the Egyptians for all the things, did Moshe go? That was the first one. And the second one is, what did Moshe contribute to the Mishkan?
Wait, so the first question was that when the Jews went out to ask for the Egyptians for stuff,
did Moshe join them? That's
did
number
Moshe
one.
join? Okay.
Okay, and the second one is when they were asked to all contribute to the Mishkan, what did Moshe contribute? Because nobody ever discusses.
Right. Right. So the thing is that it seems that Moshe was not told to contribute. I think I saw something about the wording of the command, the Yikhu li Truma, that Hashem wanted that they should bring Truma, not Moshe. Possibly you could say because Moshe had nothing to do with the sin of the golden calf. So you could possibly say that's connected as well, that Moshe was not. I don't know that there was any gift given from Moshe, and possibly there could be a reason for it, and possibly there's a verse that implies that. And I think I saw somewhere that where it's brought down that maybe Moshe's didn't have that mitzvah, like it was clearly said for the Jewish people and not for Moshe. I'll have to look up where I saw it. I think I might have seen it in one of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's sichos, but yeah, I might be wrong. But if I remember correctly, it based on the Yikhu li Truma that they should take from that they're meant to give the Truma and not they're meant to give the donations. Yes, Mordechai.
Well, yeah, in fact, I think, doesn't it say that the gifts of the Nisim at the inauguration of the Mishkan was because they originally said to themselves, the people will give, and anything that is lacking will donate. And it turns out that the people gave everything, and the Nisim didn't have the opportunity because they were just waiting around for the people.
Right, right. And they lost the letter from their name. And we don't find Moshe lost any letters from his name. So
Rabbi?
right. Okay, well, just 1 second. I think so. I just wanted to get back to Ezra. So Ezra, you asked 2 things. So one was about Moshe, maybe he didn't give, and regarding him borrowing from his neighbors. Yeah, it doesn't, I don't know if it says anything clearly about him borrowing from his neighbors, but we do know that he was trying to pull the people away from the when they were getting all the booty that they had from at the seashore from all the chariots and the dead Egyptians. So Moshe was there pulling everyone away while they're all trying to get all the precious stuff over there. Moshe was pulling them to, we have to move, we have to go on to get the Torah. They were busy taking all the gold and silver. So we do find that he wasn't so involved in taking, if that's what your point is. In other words, how much wealth did Moshe have? Well, maybe he had wealth from, you're saying maybe he had a lot of wealth anyway. Is that what you're sort of like leading?
I mean, the thing that you mentioned is the fact that the shavings that came from the second set of luchot was how he became wealthy. So, but my question wasn't he also wealthy from participating in this? Going to the Egyptians and asking them
for their gold and silver,
because he was very well respected by the Egyptians, so he could have gone and asked, and he should have been able to get.
Right. It's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, seemingly he would have been a good fundraiser, It would have been good. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess we have to look at the psukim and see if anyone talks about it. Any of the commentaries mention it. But in any event, I don't know if it's that surprising. People love to gossip. And so even if he was wealthy from these other things, it doesn't minimize the fact that if they have room to claim, he must have made some. I know he was wealthy before, but I mean now, look at all the wealth that he's dealing with. Just look at his apartment, look at his car, and this, So I don't know if it's really a question, but it's interesting to look into. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ezra. Yes, Panina.
Yes. You said that their idol worship with the Egel and the whole thing, that was the Avodah Zarah was tantamount to all 613 mitzvahs. But if they had to atone for 615, well, that's 2 more, not just 1 more. So I was just wondering, what is the other thing they had to atone for in addition to the that's right. 1 more, but what's the 615th?
So it's atoning for the 613 commandments plus the breaking of the 2 tablets. So they caused the breaking of the 2 tablets. So that's 615. The only problem is we don't have 615 mitzvahs. So how do you atone for 615 sins if there's not 615 mitzvahs? But the answer is they built the tabernacle. Building the tabernacle was an atonement for all of that. Mishkan, it's called the Pikudey HaMishkan. Okay, we're going to stop here. I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.